The courtyard of the École Militaire is freezing. A pale winter light falls on ranks of soldiers standing at rigid attention, sabers drawn, forming a corridor of steel through which one man must walk. Beyond the iron fence, a crowd of several thousand Parisians has gathered in the early cold, pressing against the bars to watch. We are in Paris, at the École Militaire, on January 5th of 1895. Captain Alfred Dreyfus stands at the center of the courtyard. He's 35 years old, French artillery officer, an Alsatian Jew who has spent his entire career proving that a French Jew can be as French as anyone. He wears his officer's uniform for the last time. His sword hangs at his side. The gold braid still gleams on his sleeve. Alfred Dreyfus, you are unworthy of bearing arms. In the name of the French people, we degrade you. A sergeant major of the Republican Guard approaches Dreyfus. Methodically, with practiced hands, he tears the insignia from the captain's sleeves, rips the buttons from his coat, snaps the gold braid free. Each piece of rank, each symbol of belonging, stripped away and thrown to the ground. Then, the sergeant takes Dreyfus's sword, breaks it over his knee, and drops the pieces at his feet. The crowd is screaming. Some are screaming, "Death to the traitor," believing Dreyfus sold military secrets to Germany. But others, many of them, are screaming something different. Death to the Jews. They made the leap from one man's alleged crime to an entire people's guilt. This degradation ceremony confirms what they've always suspected. Jews can never truly be French. Their loyalty will always be somewhere else. Dreyfus is marched around the perimeter of the courtyard, past every rank of soldier, so they can see what happens to a traitor. He shouts his innocence. The crowd drowns him out. He will be shipped to Devil's Island, a prison colony off the coast of South America, where he will spend 5 years in solitary confinement for a crime committed by someone else entirely. In the press gallery, a 34-year-old journalist from Vienna is watching. His name is Theodor Herzl, covering the trial for the Neue Freie Presse. He's secular, assimilated, and cosmopolitan. The kind of Jew who believes the answer to anti-Semitism is integration. Be more French than the French, more German than the Germans, more European than any European. Earn your way in through merit and cultural refinement. Now he sits watching a decorated French officer, a man who did everything right, who served France with distinction, who assimilated perfectly, being torn apart by a mob that sees only his Jewishness. In Paris, the capital of the Enlightenment, the city that first declared the rights of man, the country that first emancipated its Jews. If it can happen here, Herzl realizes, it can happen anywhere. If it can happen anywhere, then assimilation is a dead end. Jews will never be safe as guests in other people's nations. They need a nation of their own. 2,000 years of exile, 2,000 years of next year in Jerusalem, and now, in a frozen courtyard in Paris, a Viennese journalist watches a French mob prove that the longing was never sentimental. It was survival. This is part 2 of our series on Israel and Palestine, Balfour's Promise. You know how they say you can't understand someone until you walk a mile in their shoes? Well, I'd argue you can't understand a nation until you've walked through its history. Not just the highlight reel or the sanitized version you find in textbooks. I mean really getting into its DNA. Those defining moments that shaped everything that came after. Those moments where paths were chosen, where decisions were made in palaces and backrooms and city streets that changed the course of millions of lives. I'm your host, Paul, and this is Double Helix, Blueprint of Nations, where we unravel the genetic code of countries through their most transformative moments. Think of it like ancestry testing, but for entire nations. We dig deep into the historical DNA, finding those crucial moments that made countries who they are today. In the last episode, we watched Rome destroy the Second Temple in the year 70 CE and attempt to erase Jewish identity from the land entirely, renaming Judea as Syria Palestina, banning Jews from Jerusalem, demolishing every physical marker of their presence. We ended with a question that sits at the heart of everything that follows. What happens when a longing maintained across 20 centuries collides with a presence maintained across those same 20 centuries? When both sides are right, and that the land between the river and the sea cannot honor both claims at once. Today we're going to watch that collision begin. Because the longing we traced in episode 1, the one embedded in every prayer, every broken glass, every Passover seder, finally finds its political voice in the 1890s. And when it does, it collides with a land that has been lived in, built upon, and loved by people who are about to be told that their home has been promised to someone else. We're covering roughly 60 years in this episode, from the birth of political Zionism through the UN partition plan of 1947. By the end, two peoples will be staring at each other across a line drawn on a map by people who will never have to live with the consequences of those choices. The war that follows is for episode 3. Before Herzl's answer can make sense, you need to understand the question. And the question is, what does it mean to be a Jew in late 19th century Europe? In Western Europe, France, Germany, Austria, Britain, Jews had been gradually emancipated over the previous century. They can own property, attend university, enter professions, serve in the military. The price of admission is assimilation. Speak the national language, adopt national customs, treat your Judaism as a private spiritual matter rather than a public identity. Dreyfus paid that price in full. It bought him nothing. In Eastern Europe, the situation is far worse. The Russian Empire, home to nearly 5 million Jews, the largest Jewish population on earth, confines them to the Pale of Settlement, a strip of territory running from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Within the Pale, Jews face legal restrictions on where they can live, what jobs they can hold, how many can attend university. They live in shtetls, small towns where Yiddish is spoken, where the synagogue is the center of communal life, where Jewish culture is rich and vibrant and completely vulnerable to the next pogrom. The pogroms, organized massacres of Jewish communities, have been a feature of Russian life for decades. They surged in 1881 after the assassination of Tsar Alexander II, when rumors blamed Jews for the killing. Mobs descend on Jewish neighborhoods with the tacit approval of local authorities. Houses are burned, shops are looted, women are raped, men are beaten to death in the streets. Let me take you to the one that changes everything. We are in Kishinev, Bessarabia, on April 6 of 1903. It starts on Easter Sunday. A Christian boy has been found dead weeks earlier, and the local newspaper has been publishing articles accusing Jews of ritual murder. The ancient blood libel, the lie that Jews kill Christian children to use their blood in religious ceremonies. The accusation is absurd. It has been absurd for 8 centuries. The authorities know it's absurd. They let the newspaper publish it anyway. After Easter services, mobs pour through the Jewish quarter of Kishinev. Over the next 2 days, they kill 49 Jews, injure over 500, and destroy 1,500 homes. Women are raped in front of their families. Children are thrown from windows. The police stand by and watch, and some even participate. The Kishinev pogrom shocks the world in a way that previous pogroms haven't, partly because journalists managed to document it in detail. Photographs circulate. Eyewitness testimony is published. For the first time, the Western world sees, in black and white, what Jewish life in Russia actually looks like. But here's what matters for our story. The poet Chaim Nahum Bialik visits Kishinev in the aftermath and writes a poem called In the City of Slaughter. It's addressed to the victims, and it is furious. But the fury is directed at the Jews themselves, at their passivity, at their willingness to hide and pray while their daughters were violated and their elders were beaten to death. The poem is a thunderclap in Jewish consciousness. It doesn't ask for sympathy. It demands transformation. Stop being victims. Stop wanting for the world to protect you. The world will never protect you. Protect yourselves. Build something of your own. This is the soil from which Zionism grows. The Dreyfus Affair proves assimilation is a dead end in the West. The pogroms prove that survival itself is precarious in the East. And Herzl, who publishes The Jewish State in 1896, a year after watching Dreyfus degraded, gives the longing its first political framework. The First Zionist Congress meets in Basel, Switzerland, in August of 1897. 208 delegates from 17 countries. Herzl, presiding, sees them as the embryo of a future Jewish parliament. The Congress declares that Zionism seeks to establish a home for the Jewish people in Palestine secured under public law. In Palestine. The delegates could have chosen anywhere. Argentina was discussed. Uganda was later proposed by the British, but the Congress chooses Palestine because the longing we trace in Episode 1 makes any other location meaningless. Next year in Jerusalem has been said for 18 centuries. You can't redirect that to next year in Buenos Aires. Herzl writes in his diary afterwards, "At Basel, I founded the Jewish state. If I said this out loud today, I would be greeted by universal laughter. In 5 years, perhaps, and certainly in 50 years, everyone will perceive it." He was only off by 1 year. The State of Israel is declared 51 years later. But here's the thing Herzl writes very little about, and this silence will echo through everything that follows. The people already living in Palestine. The Arab population, roughly 450,000 at the time of the First Congress, barely appears in early Zionist thinking. When they do, they're treated as a minor logistical problem that will resolve itself once the benefits of Jewish development become apparent. This is a failure of imagination that will prove catastrophic. The Zionists are not villains. They are persecuted people desperately seeking safety, but they are building a movement on a premise that the land that they're heading towards is theirs by right, and that the people already on it will either welcome them or step aside. As we now know, neither will happen. We are in Jaffa port, in Ottoman Palestine, in 1904. The immigrants come in waves. Historians call them aliyot, or ascents, because in Jewish tradition, going to Israel is always going up, regardless of altitude. The first aliyah, from 1882 to 1903, brings roughly 25 to 35,000 Jews, mostly from the Russian Empire, fleeing the pogroms. The second aliyah, from 1904 to 1914, brings another 35 to 40,000. Younger, more ideological, many of them socialists who dream of building a new kind of Jewish society through agricultural labor. Let me take you to the shores of Jaffa to watch one of these arrivals. A young man named David Grun. He later changed his name to David Ben-Gurion, is 20 years old, arriving from Poland. He's a committed socialist and Zionist who believes that Jewish redemption will come through physical labor on the land. He's expecting, well, it's hard to say exactly what he's expecting. The posters back in Poland showed orange groves and clean white buildings. The reality of Ottoman Jaffa is something else entirely. The first thing that hits him is the heat, then the noise. Arabic everywhere, a language he's never heard spoken. The smells of Middle Eastern port towns, fish, spices, animal dung, the salt of the sea, and people. Arab longshoremen handling cargo, Arab merchants selling fruit, Arab children running along the waterfront. This is in fact an Arab city, functioning in Arabic, governed by Ottoman law, populated by people who have been here for many, many generations. Ben-Gurion will later write about this moment, and what's striking is what he notices and what he doesn't. He notices the landscape, the beauty of it, the potential. He notices the Jewish settlement already established by first Aliyah immigrants. He barely notices the Arab majority population as a political reality. They are just part of the scenery, like the palm trees. The early Zionist settlers, the Halutzim, the pioneers, go to work. They drain swamps, clear stones, and plant orchards. They build kibbutzim, collective farms run on socialist principles where property is shared. Decisions are democratic, and children are raised communally. It's idealistic, back-breaking work, and many of them die of malaria and exhaustion. The ones who survive build something genuinely remarkable, a functioning, self-sustaining Jewish agricultural community in a land where Jews haven't farmed for 2,000 years. And the land they're farming? Some of it is purchased legally from absentee Ottoman landlords, wealthy effendis who live in Beirut or Damascus, and who are happy to sell marginal land at premium prices. Some of it is purchased from local Arab landowners. The purchases are all legal under Ottoman law. But legal and just are two different things. When a Jewish organization buys land from an absentee landlord, the Arab tenant farmers, the felahim, who've worked the land for generations, are evicted. They have no legal claim because they don't own the deed. They have every moral claim because it's the only life they've ever known. They go from farmers to landless laborers overnight. And the Jewish buyers who displace them often have no idea that they've just destroyed someone's livelihood. The transaction happened in an office in Beirut somewhere. The human cost happens in a village in Galilee. And this is where we need to spend some time at the other side of the story, because it's the side that gets told the least. The Arab population of Palestine at the turn of the century is overwhelmingly rural, roughly 450,000 people, mostly Muslim, but about 10% Christian, living in villages and small towns that had functioned for centuries as part of the Ottoman provincial system. They grow wheat, barley, olives, and citrus. They raise livestock. They have local leaders, the mukhtars, who mediate disputes and represent the village to Ottoman authorities. These are people with deep roots, families that can trace their presence in a specific village across 5, 10, 15 generations. They don't think of themselves primarily as Palestinians, yet that national identity is still forming. But they know with absolute certainty that this is their land. Their grandfathers are buried here. Their olive trees are older than memory. They watch Jewish immigrants arrive with a mixture of curiosity, wariness, and growing alarm. The early arrivals are strange. Europeans who dress differently, speak a language nobody understands, and have peculiar ideas about communal farming. But they're few in number, and they keep to themselves. The real problem is what the settlers represent. A movement with international backing, financial resources, and a stated goal of creating a Jewish homeland on land that already has a population. And the Arab population is paying attention sooner than most histories acknowledge. We are in Haifa in 1908. A journalist named Najib Nassar sits at his desk at al-Khalidi, an Arabic-language newspaper he founded in Haifa the previous year. Nassar has been investigating Zionist land purchases across the Galilee and the Jezreel Valley, and what he has found alarms him. The purchases are accelerating. The new owners are consolidating holdings. Arab tenant farmers are being displaced, and the buyers are part of an organized international movement with funding from Europe that makes the local Arab economy look like a child's allowance. Nassar begins publishing a series of articles warning that Zionism represents an existential threat to Arab Palestine. He is very specific. He names the organizations, traces the money, documents the evictions. His reporting is among the earliest sustained Arabic-language journalism about the Zionist movement, and it circulates beyond Haifa to Jerusalem, Jaffa, Beirut, and Damascus. He's also joined by others. Ruhi al-Khalidi, a Palestinian intellectual, a polyglot, and a member of the Ottoman Parliament, writes a study of the Zionist movement that draws on Hebrew and European sources. Al-Khalidi reads Herzl in the original German. He understands exactly what the Zionists intend. His analysis, circulated among Ottoman officials and Arab intellectuals, is prescient and precise. This is a national movement with the backing of European powers, and if it is allowed to proceed unchecked, it will dispossess the Arab population already in Palestine. These are not ignorant peasants reacting blindly to change. These are educated, cosmopolitan thinkers who see clearly what is coming and who lack the political power to stop it. The Ottoman authorities listen, sometimes restrict immigration, and ultimately fail to act decisively. The European powers have other priorities, and the Zionist movement, with its international network of financial resources, operates on a scale that local Arab opposition simply cannot match. By 1914, the Arab population of Palestine has organized politically against Zionist immigration. Newspapers in Jaffa and Jerusalem published editorials warning that continued Jewish land purchases will dispossess the Arab population. Petitions are sent to the Ottoman government demanding restrictions on Jewish immigration. Arab leaders traveled to Istanbul to lobby against the Zionists. The Ottoman authorities, for their part, tried to limit Jewish immigration. They imposed restrictions on land purchases, require immigrants to take Ottoman citizenship, and periodically close the borders. But enforcement is very weak, corrupt. Corruption is endemic, and the Zionists find ways around every restriction. Then, the First World War destroys the Ottoman Empire entirely, and everything changes. At the Foreign Office in London, the British government is fighting a world war. It is November 2nd of 1917. Things are going badly. The Western Front is a slaughterhouse. Russia is collapsing into revolution, which means Germany will soon be able to shift troops westwards. Britain needs allies, resources, strategic advantages, anything that might tip the balance of the war. Into this desperate calculation walks Chaim Weizmann, a Russian-born chemist working at the University of Manchester. Weizmann has done important war work for the British. He's developed a process of synthesizing acetone, essential for munitions production, and he's leveraged this access into meetings with senior British officials. He is charming, brilliant, persistent, and he has one objective: a British declaration of support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Arthur Balfour, the Foreign Secretary, a philosophical conservative who finds Zionism intellectually compelling and who harbors some genuinely anti-Semitic assumptions about Jewish influence, agrees to issue the declaration. The reasons are tangled. Sympathy for the Zionist cause, a belief that Jewish support in America and Russia will help the war effort, strategic calculations about controlling Palestine as a buffer for the Suez Canal, and the particular imperial confidence that Britain can promise things it doesn't own to people who haven't asked for them. On November 2nd, 1917, Balfour sends a letter to Lord Rothschild, a leader of the British Jewish community. 67 words that will reshape the Middle East. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Read that again. Read it carefully, because the contradiction that will define the next century is right there, hiding in plain sight. Let me explain. The Declaration promises a national home for the Jewish people. It also promises that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Those existing non-Jewish communities, the Arabs, who make up 90% of the population, are referred to only as what they are not. They are defined by negation. They are the people who are not Jewish, living in a land that is being promised to the Jewish people. And notice, the Declaration protects the civil and religious rights. It says nothing about their political rights. Their rights to self-determination, their rights to have a say in who governs their homeland. In 67 words, the Balfour Declaration creates a legal framework in which 90% of a territory's population has civil and religious rights, but no political rights, while a global diaspora has political rights to a homeland most of them have never even visited. The British, characteristically, seem to believe that they can manage this contradiction indefinitely. As we know, they're wrong. And the Balfour Declaration is only one of 3 incompatible promises Britain makes during the war. In 1915 through 16, the Hussein McMahon In 1915 and 16, the Hussein McMahon Correspondence promises Sharif Hussein of Mecca British support for an independent Arab kingdom, with boundaries that Arabs understand to include Palestine and that Britain will later claim excluded. In 1916, the Sykes-Picot Agreement secretly carves the Ottoman territories between Britain and France, with Palestine designated for international administration. 3 promises, 3 sets of expectations, 0 possibility that all of them can be honored simultaneously. The British government, which prides itself on pragmatism, has created a situation where pragmatism is no longer possible. They've promised the same land to different peoples and convinced themselves that diplomacy will sort it all out later. Diplomacy will not sort it all out later. Britain takes formal control of Palestine under a League of Nations mandate. The mandate's terms specifically incorporate the Balfour Declaration's language about a Jewish national home. Sir Herbert Samuel, himself a Zionist and a Jew, is appointed the first High Commissioner. The appointment signals to the Arab population that Britain means what it said. What follows over the next 2 decades is one of the strangest experiments in colonial history. The British attempting to govern a territory while simultaneously facilitating the growth of one national community and suppressing the resistance of another. The Mandate period is a case study on how imperial arrogance creates unsolvable problems. The Jewish community in Palestine, the Yishuv, builds parallel institutions at remarkable speed. A labor federation, the Histadrut, that functions as both a trade union and an economic engine. Schools, hospitals, and proto-military force called the Haganah, officially defensive, practically a standing army in waiting, a Hebrew language press, a democratic governing structure. By the 1930s, the Yishuv is a state in everything but name, waiting for the legal fiction of British authority to be removed so it can declare itself. The Arab community watches the construction with mounting fury and diminishing options. They petition the British government. They send delegations to London. They organize strikes and protests. They make the same argument over and over. We are the majority population. This is our land. We did not consent to the Balfour Declaration. We did not consent to Jewish immigration. We did not consent to a mandate whose stated purpose is to create a national home for another people on our soil. But the Arab community is building too. And this part of the story rarely gets told. Palestinian civil society during the mandate is vibrant, sophisticated, and modern. Jaffa becomes a thriving cultural capital. Arabic language newspapers, Filastin, Al-Difa, Al-Karmil, developed investigative journalism and political commentary that rivals anything being published in Cairo or Beirut. Palestinian intellectuals, lawyers, and doctors form professional associations. Women's organizations emerge. The Arab Women's Association, founded in 1929, organizes politically at a level that surprises the British administration. Khalil al-Sakakini, one of the most influential Palestinian educators of the period, builds schools that blend Arab cultural identity with modern pedagogy. His diaries, published decades later, reveal a man deeply rooted in Jerusalem's intellectual life, writing with warmth about his neighbors, his students, his city. He represents a Palestinian urban culture that is literate, cosmopolitan, and deeply invested in the future of this land. These aren't people waiting for history to happen to them. They're building a society, and they're building it on the ground that the British have promised to someone else. The difference between the Yishuv and the Palestinian community during the mandate is structural, and it matters. The mandate's terms required Britain to facilitate the Jewish national home. The Yishuv has official recognition, protected immigration channels, and the backing of international Zionist organizations with access to European and American capital. The Arab community has no equivalent external support network. The Arab states are themselves under colonial rule. There is no Arab equivalent of the Jewish Agency, no global fundraising apparatus, no guaranteed seat at the negotiating table. Palestinian leaders are fighting with moral arguments against an opponent armed with legal instruments and imperial backing. The British listen politely and do nothing fundamental. Commissions are appointed, reports are written, white papers are issued. Each one acknowledges that Arab grievances have some merit. None of them changes the basic trajectory. Jewish immigration continues, the Yishuv grows stronger, and Arab frustration deepens. The flashpoints come with increasing regularity. Let me take you to the ancient city of Hebron, where a small Jewish community has lived alongside a much larger Arab population for centuries. It is August 24th of 1929. In August of 1929, a dispute over Jewish access to the Western Wall in Jerusalem spirals into a territory-wide riot. In Hebron, Arab mobs attack the Jewish quarter. 67 Jews are killed over 2 days. Men, women, children, some elderly scholars who lived peacefully alongside their Arab neighbors for decades. The savagery is intimate. People are hacked with axes, stabbed with knives, bludgeoned with iron bars. And in the same city, on the same days, Arab families hide their Jewish neighbors. They take them into their homes, face down the mobs and risk their own lives to protect people they've known for years. An Arab family named Abu Shamiyeh shelters dozens of Jews. Others do the same across the city. Nearly 2/3 of Hebron's Jewish community survives because of Arab intervention. Both of these things are true: the massacre and the rescue, the mob and the neighbor. This is the kind of complexity that gets lost when the story is told as a simple narrative of one side against the other. Here's again where the story demands we hold two things at once. The murders in Hebron are atrocities. There's no justification for killing civilians, no grievance that makes massacring families acceptable. And the Arab rage behind the violence comes from somewhere real. From watching a colonial power restructure their homeland around them while they have no meaningful voice in the process. The perpetrators are murderers. The conditions that produce them are the result of imperial decisions made in London without Arab consent. The same duality applies on the other side. The Haganah's response, arming Jewish communities, building a self-defense capacity that will eventually become the Israeli Defense Forces, is understandable. And the growing militarization of the Yishuv makes the Arab population feel even more besieged in their own land. Each act of violence confirms the other side's worst fears. Each confirmation generates more violence. The spiral has no natural stopping point. In 1936, the Arab population launches the most sustained resistance to the Mandate period. It begins as a general strike, 6 months of commercial shutdown that demonstrates the breadth of Arab opposition to continued Jewish immigration. When the strike fails to produce British concessions, it evolves into armed revolt. Arab guerrilla fighters attack British military installations, Jewish settlements, and the infrastructure of the Mandate itself, blowing up railway lines, cutting telephone wires, and ambushing convoys. The British crushed the revolt with overwhelming force, collective punishment, demolishing the homes of suspected rebels, a practice Israel will later adopt. Mass detention, summary executions. By 1939, the revolt is broken. Over 5,000 Arabs are dead. The Arab political leadership is shattered, its most effective leaders killed, imprisoned, or exiled. This matters enormously for what comes in 1948. The Arab revolt exhausts Arab military capacity and destroys Arab political organization at exactly the moment when both will be needed the most. The Yishuv, by contrast, uses the same period to strengthen the Haganah, develop military experience fighting alongside the British against Arab rebels, and build the command structures that will fight the War of Independence a decade later. By 1939, the British are exhausted. They issue the MacDonald White Paper, which drastically limits Jewish immigration to Palestine. 75,000 over 5 years, then no more without Arab consent. It is a major concession to Arab demands. It's also the worst possible timing in the history of the world. Because in September of 1939, the Second World War begins, and the doors of Palestine slam shut just as 6 million Jews are about to need them the most. I'm going to treat the Holocaust with the weight it demands, but without trying to narrate it in full. That will be a series on its own, and others have told it with the gravity it deserves. What matters for this story is this. Between 1939 and 1945, Nazi Germany murders 6 million Jews, 2 out of every 3 Jews in Europe. Entire communities, the shtetls of Poland, the intellectual circles of Vienna, the ancient congregations of Thessaloniki and Amsterdam and Budapest, erased completely. 1,000 years of European Jewish civilization reduced to ashes and bone. The survivors emerge into a world that has no place for them. Their homes are occupied by others. Their communities no longer exist. Many who return to their towns in Poland, Hungary, Romania are met with hostility. in some cases with more violence. The Kielce pogrom in Poland in July of 1946 kills 42 Holocaust survivors who made the mistake of going home. So where do they go? The answer for hundreds of thousands of survivors is Palestine. They've lost everything: families, homes, communities, the illusion that Europe could ever be safe, the ancient longing we traced in episode 1, the political movement born from the Dreyfus Affairs and the pogroms, and now the absolute empirical proof that the world will watch while Jews are murdered. All of it converges on the same point: Palestine, the homeland, the only place where Jews can protect themselves because no one else ever will. And here's where the tragedy deepens into something almost unbearable. The Palestinian Arabs, watching from across the Mediterranean, can see what's coming. They have genuine sympathy for the victims of the Holocaust. They are not, by and large, anti-Semites in the European sense. But they can see that Europe's crime against the Jews is about to be resolved at their expense. This is the cruelest dimension of the entire story. The Jews fleeing to Palestine are not responsible for the Holocaust. They are the victims. The Palestinians being asked to make room for them are not responsible for the Holocaust either. But someone will pay the price for Europe's crime, and the international community has decided it will be the people who had the least to do with it. The Palestinian leadership during this period makes catastrophic mistakes, most notably the Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Amin al-Husseini, whose wartime alliance with Nazi Germany will be used for decades to discredit the Palestinian cause. Al-Husseini's collaboration is real and indefensible, but treating it as representative of Palestinian attitudes is like treating Vichy as representative of all French people. The vast majority of Palestinians have nothing to do with the Mufti's wartime activities. They're farmers, shopkeepers, teachers, nurses, people living their lives and watching with growing dread as the post-war order takes shape around them. The ship Exodus, 1947, a battered American river steamer renamed for the biblical departure from Egypt, carries 4,515 Jewish refugees from France towards Palestine. Most are Holocaust survivors. Many have numbers tattooed on their arms. They're heading for a homeland that the British government, still enforcing the 1939 White Paper, has declared closed to them. The British Navy intercepts the ship off the coast of Palestine. Royal Marines board it, and a fight breaks out. 3 refugees are killed, the ship is seized, and its passengers are forcibly transferred to British transport vessels. And then, the British government makes a decision that will haunt it for decades. Instead of interning the passengers in Cyprus, as they've done with previous illegal immigrants, they send the Exodus passengers back to Europe, back to Germany, specifically the displaced persons camps in the British occupation zone. Holocaust survivors are sent back to Germany. The images of British soldiers forcing Jews off ships and back into the camps of the country that tried to exterminate them are broadcast around the world. The moral authority of the British mandate, already threadbare, collapsed entirely. American public opinion turns decisively against British policy in Palestine. President Truman, facing domestic political pressure and genuinely moved by the plight of the survivors, pushes for Jewish immigration and statehood. The British, who have been trying to hold the mandate together for 30 years, finally give up. And it is worth noting what pushes them over the edge, because it comes from both sides. The Jewish underground fights the British with increasing ferocity after the war. The Irgun, led by Menachem Begin, a future Israeli prime minister, carries out a campaign of bombings, assassinations, and attacks on British military and government targets. The Stern Gang, even more radical, assassinates Lord Moyne, the British Minister of State in Cairo in 1944. In July of 1946, the Irgun bombs the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, the headquarters of the British Mandate administration, killing 91 people, British Arab and Jewish. The British government, already exhausted by the war, facing an uncontrollable Jewish insurgency on the side and unresolved Arab opposition on the other, concludes that the cost of holding Palestine exceeds any possible benefit. In February of 1947, they referred the Palestine question to the newly formed United Nations. We can't solve this, they tell the world. You try. We are at the United Nations General Assembly in Flushing Meadows, New York, November 29 of 1947. The United Nations Special Committee on Palestine has recommended partition, dividing the territory into a Jewish state, an Arab state, and an international zone around Jerusalem. The General Assembly is voting on the plan. The proposed borders are absurd. The Jewish state would include the Negev Desert, the coastal plain, and the eastern Galilee, roughly 56% of the land for a population that is 33% of the total. The Arab state would include the West Bank highlands, the Gaza Strip, and western Galilee, roughly 43% for a population that is 67% of the total. Jerusalem and Bethlehem would be internationalized. The Jewish leadership, represented by the Jewish Agency, accepts the plan. It gives them less than what they want, no Jerusalem and no Western Galilee, but it gives them the essential thing, international legal recognition of Jewish statehood. After 2,000 years of exile, after the Holocaust, after everything, a Jewish state will exist. The details can be negotiated later. The Arab leadership, however, rejects the plan categorically. For them, it requires accepting two things they cannot accept. First, the legitimacy of a Jewish state on land that was majority Arab within living memory. Second, the dispossession of hundreds of thousands of Arabs who live in the territory allocated to the Jewish state. From the Arab perspective, the partition plans ask them to ratify their own dispossession, to agree, formally and legally, that strangers who arrived in the last 50 years have an equal or greater claim to the land than people whose families have been there for centuries. Both positions are internally coherent. Both reflect genuine convictions, and both are irreconcilable. The United States votes yes. Truman has overruled his own State Department, which warned that partition will destabilize the entire Middle East. The Soviet Union votes yes. Stalin calculates that a Jewish state will be socialist and anti-British, weakening Western influence in the region. He's wrong about both, but his vote matters. Britain abstains. Having created the problem, the British government declines to vote on its solution. The Arab states vote no, unanimously. Egypt, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Yemen. Every Arab delegation opposes partition and warns that its implementation will be resisted by force. The final tally? 33 in favor, 13 against, 10 abstentions. The resolution passes. In Jewish communities across Palestine and around the world, people pour into the streets, dancing, weeping, singing. In Tel Aviv, crowds fill Rothschild's Boulevard. Strangers embrace. The blue and white flag is raised over spontaneous celebrations. For survivors of the Holocaust, for refugees who crossed oceans and deserts, for families who have said next year in Jerusalem, for generations beyond counting, this is the fulfillment of a promise 2,000 years old. A Jewish state will exist. Never again will Jews depend on the mercy of others for their survival. In Arab communities across Palestine, and in the wider Middle East, the reaction is grief, fury, and resolve. In Jerusalem's Old City, in Jaffa, in Haifa, in hundreds of villages throughout the territory, people gather in stunned anger. They have just been told by a body that has existed for 2 years that their homeland of centuries will be divided, that a majority of their land will be given to a population that represents a third of the inhabitants, and that their objections are overruled. The Arab Higher Committee calls a 3-day general strike. Sporadic violence breaks out within hours. The British, who still technically administer the territory, watch from their fortified compounds and count the days until they can leave. There's a moment in the aftermath of the partition vote that captures something essential about this conflict. Golda Meir, who will later become Prime Minister of Israel, reportedly meets with King Abdullah of Transjordan in a secret meeting in Naharajim in the Jordan River. They've met before. They respect each other. Abdullah is the most pragmatic of the Arab leaders, a man who sees the partition vote as a reality to be managed rather than a disaster to be reversed. Meir asks him to honor the partition plan. Abdullah tells her that he understands the Jewish need for a state, but he's under tremendous pressure from other Arab leaders who have promised their publics that partition will be stopped by force. War is the only alternative, he tells her. We will win, Meir replies. Yes, Abdullah says. I believe you will. Both are right. Both know they are right. But neither can stop what's coming. That exchange, if it happened as reported, captures the tragedy in miniature. Two leaders, both reasonable by the standards of their time, both capable of seeing the other's perspective, both unable to alter the course of their peoples have set. The forces in motion are bigger than any individual. The longing of 20 centuries and the presence of 20 centuries are about to collide in violence, and the collision will produce sequences that neither Meir nor Abdullah nor anyone else in November of 1947 can fully imagine. We started this episode with Theodor Herzl watching a French mob prove that assimilation was a dead end, and concluding that Jews needed a nation of their own. We ended with a nation about to be born, in blood, in joy, in grief, and in a war that will create a refugee crisis still unresolved 8 decades later. The Zionists who built the Yishuv were driven by persecution and sustained by an ancient longing. The Arab Palestinians who opposed them were defending their homes and their right to determine their own future. The British, who created the mandate, were playing imperial chess with other people's lives. And the international community that voted for partition believed it was solving a problem when it was really creating a new one. Everyone acted according to their interest, their fears, their understandings of justice. And the result is a catastrophe that has never ended. Next time, on Double Helix, is May 14th of 1948. David Ben-Gurion stands beneath a portrait of Theodor Herzl and declares the establishment of the State of Israel. Within hours, 5 Arab armies invade. What follows is a war that Israelis call the War of Independence and Palestinians call the Nakba, the catastrophe. 750,000 Palestinians become refugees. A new nation is born, and the competing traumas of victory and dispossession will shape every crisis in the Middle East for the next 3/4 of a century. Until then, thank you for listening. We will see you soon.